Welcome to another episode of the Carry Trainer Higher Line podcast. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Higher Line podcast. We've got a pretty special one today. This is world champion, like multi-time, 7 times, 8 times, 20 times, a lot of times. You don't even count anymore. You don't even know. You don't even know. Max Michel, world champion, Guinness World Record holder, 10-year Army veteran, father, husband. I see footballs behind you. We're going to have to talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
Team Sig. I heard tell maybe you're going to High Point. We'll get into that later.
Yeah, we'll dive into that here in a bit.
Yeah. All right, now, we were just chatting before we started recording about your name. Your name is French in nature. Is your family from Louisiana?
Yeah, we're from Louisiana. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm born and raised here.
Some Creole blood in you?
Yeah, I think we have a little bit of everything in us. So, I don't know the whole story, but from what I'm told, our ancestors came over from Europe and kind of settled here. And, we have a little mixture of everything in us.
You don't sound like a Louisiana folk.
No, I don't, man. Funny story. So I'm sure we'll get into this whole, background, but one of the first things I did, I joined the Army when I was 17 years old, and I became an instructor pretty quickly as a pistol shooter. And one of the things I was told pretty quickly was like, hey, we need you to be able to speak and engage with an audience, and we want you to be able to communicate with people. So I ended up taking speech classes and instructor courses at a very young age when I was in the Army to better relate with other soldiers. And I know that sounds crazy, but that was one of the things I was told to do.
That's actually cool. So I think I read a little bit about this. At 17, you were already doing some hot rod pistol shooting, right?
Right.
So you went into the Army and they're like, hey, this kid actually, is really good at this. Let's get him teaching other people. But you sounded like the Cajun Chef is what you're saying.
That's about right.
Yeah.
We can't understand what you're saying, so nobody's going to listen. So, it was a funny story though. I was kind of taken back by it, but, I'm very appreciative of it, for now.
You were on the marksmanship team, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I've spent my entire career at the U.S. Army Marksmanship Unit.
Okay. Captain of that for some of those years or all of them?
Yeah. So, like I said, I joined when I was 17, and it was just me and one other person on the team at the time. We weren't really our own section. We had several sections at the AMU, maybe 7 or so different shooting disciplines at the time. And we weren't one of those disciplines at the moment. It was fairly new. Action shooting was fairly new, kind of.
I was about to comment on that. That was 21, 22 years ago. IPSC was huge, but not like today.
Right, and you have to remember too, this was before the war on terrorism. So at this point, there was no change in how we prepared to fight as a country, at least to my knowledge at that point. And once things started to change, as far as, the war on terrorism, guys going to Iraq, kicking down doors, and the fight changed, we became a lot more valuable to the Army. And that's when we started getting a little bit more funding as an action shooting team, because we were looked at as, hey, these guys are soldiers, yes, but they can provide, and they're competitive shooters, but they can give back, because these guys, it's very applicable to what's going on in the modern day battlefield. We shoot rounds at a high rate of speed with what I call acceptable accuracy. We're not trying to shoot the bullseye at 300 yards or the bullseye with a pistol at 50 yards. We're trying to shoot a man-sized silhouette 6 times in a second. And how do we translate that to the everyday soldier to make them better and more efficient and get them back home to their families? So we became more valuable, and we became our own team. We got our own shooting range, multiple bays, and we started expanding.
Where were you at? What was home base for you?
Fort Benning.
Fort Benning, okay.
Yeah, and with that, we started expanding personnel. And then at some point, when I became sergeant, staff sergeant, I became the military coach of the action shooting team, because we still didn't have a coach at that point. We were just getting more funding. So it was important for me to kind of take on that role as the coach and help train not just the Army, but also our guys in-house to make them better at what they're doing, not only competing, but also instructing. And eventually we ended up getting, what we call train the trainers, and that's where we can train a bunch of guys really quickly.
That's awesome. You'd be a good guy to talk to about this. So, of course, with your background and your action shooting sports history, you know all the greats, or at least know of them. Some of the guys are gone now, right? Not with us, but it's a kind of an interesting phenomenon. You and I were chatting for a second about our love-hate with social media, and it's really spawned an explosion of people wanting to train with guns and shoot and run and gun and do all these cool things like they see guys like you do. And I'm constantly in awe. A perfect example, somebody I know the other day posted a video and it said like run and build drills. And the guy was about 3 foot from a target and he was just blasting like a big piece of cardboard. It wasn't like an IDPA or IPSC target. And he was just kind of like, he shot a nice group. It was probably a 2-inch group and it was like a 2.25 second from the holster build drill, or 6 shot from the holster. I messaged him. I go, hey, a build drill is 7 yards and it's an A zone. And, like and he's like, what are you talking about? I go, well, that's like a build drill does not mean draw and shoot 6 rounds at just some unspecified target or distance. It's Bill Wilson. And he's like, who's Bill Wilson? I'm like, So, and that's okay. You don't have to know these things, but here's where I was going with this thought for the listeners, viewers. Like you got this interesting gap, and you and I are about the same age, where the people that came before you, like Robbie Latham and Enos and those guys, and then the people coming after you, you saw it where it came from and you're taking it to where it's going. Kind of comment on that a little bit. Like I got guys tell me like, yeah, this dude I met at the range is kind of the guy that came up with this thumb forwards grip thing. And it's just like, no, he's not.
Yeah.
Like, no.
I'm a big historian. Like I love, and that was one of the things when I was at the AMU, when guys would come onto the team, I would ask them, hey, do you know who Jethro Dionisio is? Or do you know who Doug Koenig is? Or I would just throw them a couple random names.
Just to see how deep their level of research and involvement was.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you can't come to me and say you want to be the world speed shooting champion, and not know who Jethro Dionisio is or some of these other guys who kind of paved the way for us in that sport.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, like you mentioned, Rob Latham, Doug Koenig, and Jerry Michalek, and all these names. If I throw you a name and you don't know who that is, I would ask them to do a report on it. I'd say, hey, come back and see me in 2 days. I want something written that tells me who he is, where he came from, what he did for the sport, because I think that makes us all more valuable and really appreciate where our sport came from.
Yeah.
I love that side of it. And funny you bring that up too, because I just watched a YouTube video recently. My little girl was going to sleep and I was in the room and I said, let me just throw something on. A buddy of mine sent me the link from the 1990 US Nationals. Man, it doesn't seem like that far away for me. I shot my first Nationals in 95, but it's 30 years ago. A lot has changed in 30 years. And watching those guys compete, that was a very, very unique national championship because Jerry Barnhart, which obviously a phenomenal shooter, he was incredible in his day. Now he trains our elite soldiers and warfighters now. But he was running a red dot optic on his pistol. He was the first one to win a national championship with the red dot. And that's when everything changed for my sport as far as the red dot optic. And we can talk about that too in greater detail, I'm sure. So that was a big part of history. So anyway, I watched that whole thing, and I'm really good friends with Doug Koenig now. I consider him my mentor. I consider him, the guy I look up to as far as how he went about creating a business around a sport that we all love. And there's not many people that have created a business around this sport. It's I don't know how to put this, but it's essentially an amateur sport that a few people are making a living at. And it's very difficult to make a living at that sport because it's an amateur sport, because it's not so well known. It's not on ESPN and all these other networks. Because
at SHOT Show, you are Michael Jordan. But if you go to your local mall with your kids, unfortunately, dads walk past you and they don't know if you're their kid's science teacher, and that's no offense to you, but like you said, it's a finite amount of people that.
It's 100% right, man. There's just, it's kind of cool in that regard because, when I go to the ranges, I can communicate with people, you can take pictures, sign autographs, you can help people. But when you're off the range and with your family, you have all your privacy in the world. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. But nonetheless, it was just, being able to, see that history when I was watching back in the 90s, and using Doug Koenig as a great friend of mine, a great mentor of mine, to kind of help pave the way and show me the ropes. it was neat to be able to see him as a 22-year-old kid on that TV show doing what he does. You know,
I love watching those.
Dude, it's awesome. And then funny story.
Leather holsters up over the appendix.
Yes, exactly. It's so cool. I try to think like, hey, what would I be able to accomplish back then against those guys? It's no different than like, you know.
With that gear.
Exactly. Like everybody always wants to say, hey, is LeBron better than Michael Jordan? You don't.
No.
You
I
don't
don't like basketball, but I'm from Chicago. The answer is no.
See, but I would love to be able to take LeBron in his prime, Jordan in his prime, but you don't know. Like, so anyway, it's just
okay. Mike Tyson versus Ali.
It's another great one. I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean,
Tyson all day long, raw.
I mean,
ragged.
I would have to say the same, but dude, I would love to see that fight.
It would have been awesome. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. It's like, so anyway, I watched that stuff and I'm like, man, I love the history of it. And then now I don't really think of it, but I'm starting to think of it more and more now that I'm approaching almost 40 years old. I am part of that history now. For the last 20 years, I've been one of the most dominant shooters in my sport, and I don't take that lightly. I work extremely hard at it, but now I have
you sit in the mirror in the morning and comb your hair, and you say to yourself, I'm one of the most dominant people in this sport. That's how you get fired up, don't you?
No, I don't comb my hair. I actually buff my head. But it's crazy to know that. But some of these
now to think about that, you're part of that timeline.
Like, I don't know if there's that much more I can do as far as winning to cement my legacy in the sport as much as I can cementing my legacy in the industry of helping other people now. Mm-hmm. Training guys and getting guys where they want to be in life, whether it be combatively or competitively. I've won everything I've wanted to win and more, but I work for an amazing company and I love what I do, so I'm going to continue to compete. But I think now it's more about sharing the knowledge with law enforcement and military. And yes, civilians I still work with, obviously they have a passion for the sport and they need to be able to protect their loved ones as well. But being able to share that knowledge with law enforcement and military is probably my greatest passion now. So I feel like it's my responsibility. You know, I've been able to do all the cool things, win all the championships, set records all over the world. And it's not without hard work and dedication, but now I can take that and make somebody else's learning curve so much easier and smoother. And getting them better. It's really cool too. I mean, being able to interact with folks and getting that information and people looking up to me now the way I looked up to those guys. It's pretty incredible.
There's a lot so much change in the past, say 15 years or so. Like I remember when I first began to really invest in learning and training and meeting people that were some of the folks we're talking about. Just the stuff that was taught on how to do basic manipulations or theory on sites or like dots, or now you're seeing like crazy sites coming to market like that look like weird squares on edge. You see some of this stuff, like what was the guy thinking that came up with that? Mm-hmm. But back to that, like the guys then versus now. My point I was going to make. I remember like trying to get better at consistency, and I knew that my grip wasn't right. And this is the first time I think on this podcast we've talked about this kind of stuff in a long time, because we normally don't. But I couldn't go on YouTube and say how to hold a gun or how to grip a semi-automatic pistol. I couldn't even go. Enos had a book. I don't know of any other. I mean, I've got a bunch of stuff back here from like Jordan and Cirillo and those guys, but like nothing from any modern shooter had really existed, at least that I knew of. And so you'd go train with guys. There was a dude named Bob Housingay that I was mentored by, that was a 6-time IPSC champ back in the day, and he taught me stuff. But even then, he was doing like revolver stuff on a 1911 because like they hadn't sorted it out. So my point was, the dudes then were the ones that like figured out some of this stuff. The guys now just had to copy it. They didn't have to sit and like figure out how to make an airplane wing. They just had to go fly the airplane. So
yeah, and I think I don't know what your opinion is as a trainer, but I think it's great to be able to get instruction and receive instruction and learn and shorten that learning curve. But you almost have, I feel that for me, when I joined the Army, let's say, my dad got me to a certain point. My dad got me to be one of the top 50 guys in the country.
So your dad's a hell of a shooter, teacher himself.
Exactly. Yeah, he's still doing it. You know, he's in his 60s now, but he's still competing at the level he can compete at as best he can. And he's going through a couple surgeries, but he's still at it. You know, I was on the range with him a couple days ago. But he got me to a certain point. But then when I joined the Army, there was no coach. But I was very fortunate to have 1,000 rounds a day, 5 days a week for 8 to 10 months out of the year. Before the war kicked off, those first 2 years, man, I shot a ton of ammo. And I wasn't just wasting that ammo. I had a burning desire to be the fastest man in the world with a handgun. So I think that made me learn so much more. Yeah, maybe it took me longer to get where I wanted to be, but I learned so much through trial and error, and that I think makes me a more powerful instructor to be able to help and give back. But it's like you say, you know, back then we didn't have our opportunities to just type in one thing or another. But I think that
high-speed footage that you could do on your phone to slow down your reload or your draw stroke or whatever.
It's so easy just to go on Google. I mean, I went on there today, you know, hey, I want to find out how to do something. So, you know, you want to fix a part on your refrigerator, go look it up. It's going to be on there. So it kind of makes us almost
Max
like
Michel doesn't fix his own refrigerator.
Well, you know, a guy I know looked it up on YouTube. But, you know, so it's a challenge that it's like, hey, do I want to just go and get this information, or do I want to put my own time and my own work in and get better because of it? So it's one of those things. But yeah, I think it's challenging, you know, social media stuff these days.
What you just said about your own push to get good, any guy I've ever met that was like, I've got a handful of buddies that are GMs, every one of those dudes would go to the range with an ammo can of mags and a notebook and a timer, and like, you talk to all of them, and I think this is probably true with anybody that's a good golfer or fisherman or anything, like hyper focused, man. Like my friend, you know, Les Keys Martoni? I talk about him a lot on this podcast.
No.
Super solid production guy. He shoots a Beretta. The fact of the matter is, though, like this dude's dry fired guns into like oblivion, like dozens of times, and like people think, oh, that's not possible. Like, no, like there's like a box of broken parts from him dry firing until parts fall off of them. Like, I don't think the average Joe understands like the minutia in the training that goes into getting to that point. I'm not willing to. I don't have that desire like you. I want to drink beer at night and, you know, do that sort of thing. Tell dirty jokes.
Look, and that's what, yeah, exactly, right? But I tell people, I say, like, same thing I tell my kids. I have 2 boys and a girl. They're ranging from 8 to 14 years old. My boys are older. They're 12 and 14. And I tell them, just find your passion. Whatever your passion is, you have to always act as if there's someone bigger, better, faster, stronger than you, or else you're not going to be at the level you want to be at to be the most successful person that you can be. You know, my oldest boy right now, he really is pushing hard to be a collegiate football player. He's only 14.
Was that the footballs back there, or was that football stuff from you?
Yeah, it's all memorabilia stuff for me. I've been very fortunate to work with some different athletes. And
okay, so you weren't playing football as a kid.
I did as a kid, but when I was 13 years old, I made that conscious decision to become a full-time shooter.
Got it.
So, you know, so I tell my son, like, and my boys shoot, they're very good. They win local level competitions, but they're all natural. They don't work at it at all because I don't have time. It's funny, as a pro shooter, you're like, well, what do you do on the range? Well, that's my time to work, you know, and when they're at school, I hit the gym, I hit the range, and when they're home, I try to be a dad, and they like to play team sports. But I think it's important, you know, you can't just have hard work and dedication in anything. You have to have a passion and a love for it, a burning desire, or else the hard work and dedication is only going to go so long. And then you're going to say, man, I don't want to do this, and this is work. Well, yeah, I love the work. I mean, that's why I've been in the game for 30 years and 20 years as a pro, because I absolutely love to see those little bits of improvements. That's my thing. So I think it's important, you know, if you're going to be a pro shooter, or if you want to be a football player, you want to, whatever it is you want to be, you have to be able to work 10 times as hard as anybody else, not because, you know, you think that, hey, this is what it takes to be the best. You have to want it that bad that you want to be able to put in that type of work over and over and over again. So another example is I just asked my youngest son, he wants to play basketball. I said, well, and I don't see that same passion and drive in him that I see in my older boy. So I say, on a scale from 1 to 10, what's your passion on basketball? Like, if I said, hey, you can be a pro ball player, but you have to put in your entire life and work hard from this moment on, He's like, probably like a 6 or a 7. And I said, if that's your passion, you'll never make it. Your passion has to be a 12.
11, yeah, right, over the top.
There's so many people that are wanting that 1 or 2 jobs in life. And same thing for me. I've already made it to where I want to be, but it could be gone like that.
As soon as you stop chasing.
Exactly, yeah. And I tell you, I think in any sport, the longer you go, it becomes harder to find that motivation because it's like, dang, I've already won that match 10 times. Like, I want to be with my kids now. You know, that's the struggle I have. So you have to find that motivation, and that passion has to be able to fuel that motivation so that way you can continue taking your kids on trips. You can continue doing the things you love and sharing your knowledge with people. You want to continue to be relevant in your sport so people want to train with you. So you want to hang out with me on a podcast. You know what I mean? So, like, these are the challenges that you face the more you get. But if you're at the lower level and you're not finding that passion right now, you're never going to make it with a 6 or a 7 because you got a dude that's out there who wants that job just like you wanted it 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. That's good stuff. Did you get good grades in school?
I did not get the best grades in high school. I was one of those dudes who, like, just enjoyed life, wanted to play with my buddies, wanted to hang out with my guys, you know, and used school as more of a social thing because I didn't have sports. I went to a high school that didn't have team sports, so I can focus solely on shooting, and nobody at my high school shot. So when I was at school, that was my time to, like, have fun, be silly, because when I was off the range, I mean, literally, I would leave school at 2:30 every day and go to my gunsmith and work there for 2 hours a day and then go to the range in the evenings. So that was my life. So yeah.
Every day you did that.
That was pretty much every day that, you know, I would go there and hang out for 2 hours and learn. And then my dad would pick me up on his way home from work, and we'd hit the range, whether it's Dryfire, Livefire, or cleaning guns or getting ammo ready for the next session. We were working.
So what were you doing with the gunsmith?
Just, you know, if he needed me to, like, clean guns, or he would show me kind of how to work some of the machines or clean up his shop, just be around and be present, and just continue to learn any way that I could just to get more comfortable around the guns. Because at that time, you know, 13, 14, 15 years old, and still to this day, I always look for ways to separate myself from my peers. And the reason why that is because there's only so much to go around in any sport that you compete in. So I wanted sponsors to look at me as like, wow, that kid's only 13 years old. And he's, for instance, I went and spent the summer at STI, which is another gun company, competitive shooting gun company down in Texas. I went and spent
everybody listening here knows who STI is. Yeah.
So, I mean, STI is a great company, right? That I used to shoot their guns when I was a kid. That was one of my first sponsors as a kid. So I went and spent the summer at the owner's house with his son and learning. So I would always try to find ways to separate myself from everybody else. So when you say, oh, that's the 15-year-old shooter, and he's the first grandmaster at the youngest age, and he...
Were you the first youngest grand GM?
I was the youngest at the time. I don't know, maybe it's been broken now, but I was 15 years old when I did that. But you always look for ways to separate from everybody else in the audience, right? And that was one of the ways I did that. So I loved it.
I didn't know that about you. That's pretty darn cool.
So, yeah, and I loved school for the social aspect because that was my only time to really have friends. Because think about it, when I was in the gun world, there was no junior shooters around when I was there. I mean, there was very few kids shooting when I was around.
Yeah. Well, that's, as you know, that's a super expensive hobby. Besides ammunition, but just getting places to go shoot. Even if you live on a farm, if you're going to be competitive, you've got to get to matches and be able to do all that stuff. It's like hockey or horseback riding or something. It's a very expensive sport too.
Yeah.
So what got you away from shooting the STIs, the single actions?
Honestly, I was shooting single action 1911 driven guns probably until 2007 timeframe. Oddly enough, I won one of the Steel Challenge, one of the World Speed Shooting Championships. It was this whole deal. I don't know if you remember, but back in the 2003 timeframe, 2002 timeframe, they basically said, hey, it's impossible to break 72 seconds of the Steel Challenge. And that's back when we had 7 courses of fire. But if you break it, Outdoor Channel will put up 10 grand, Sig Sauer will put up 10 grand, and you also can win money from the match officials as well. So, of course, I went. I loved the sport. I went to compete in. I started shooting that sport in 2000, so I was fairly new to that game at the time. I won the championship, but I did not win all the money. In fact, it was in 2005 because it was the year of Katrina. I'm from New Orleans, so it was a big deal if I was going to go or not. So 2005, I won the match, but I was like 72.5 seconds. I just missed it or something, right? So, but that's when I began my relationship with Sig, because they were there and they were like, man, we want to give you this money so bad because we lost everything at Katrina, my family, my parents.
I want to take it.
Yeah. So they were like,
did you really? Your whole family, we can come back to that, got hammered by Katrina, huh?
Yeah, everything, dude. So the house I grew up in is just an empty lot. There's nothing there anymore. So we literally got demolished. And that was like a week before the event. I had no plans to go to the match. And my dad's like, you better get there. You've been training for it. You better go. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So we went, and I ended up winning. But I didn't win the money. Wow. So that was when we started that relationship. The gentleman who was working for Sig at the time, he wrote me a check for $500 out of his own account, just to help out my family because he really wanted to help. And that's when I realized, whoa, who's this Sig Sauer company? I know they're not a competitive shooting company back then. We were just a 226, 229 pistol company essentially. So anyway, we kept that relationship open. I wasn't ready to get out of the Army though. I was really loving what I was doing. 2006 rolled around. I shot the same match. I did not win it that year. A friend of mine, JJ Ricazo, won that year, but he did not break the record either. So the money kept going up, and they doubled the money, and they added another event. So now you had 80 seconds, but the event that they added took a lot longer than 8 seconds. So essentially the challenge got much, much harder. But going back in 2007, I actually won that year, and I broke all the records, and I did everything I needed to do. So I won, I think it was like $40,000 in that one.
So you did break this number that they did. Without that extra 8 seconds, did you break the 72 barrier on the other events?
Correct. Yeah, so I did. Yeah, so I did, because that extra event they added back then, it took us about 10 seconds to complete. So essentially you had to break 70 seconds. It was really difficult to do, but it was just God in the box with me. I don't know what the heck happened on that last stage. I mean, I just crushed it and ended up winning it. And it was, so back then, I guess, like I said, 2007, I got a phone call from the marketing guy at Sig. His name was Bud Feeney, really, really good guy. He's been around the industry for years and years. And he called me and says, hey, I just want to know who this Max Michel is that I'm giving $10,000 to from Sig. Before I write this check, I want to get to know you. And that's how my relationship even continued to grow with Sig. And we kept in touch for a couple more years. And I happened to be in their area shooting the Area 7 championship. And I went there and took an interview. So this is like kind of 2008 timeframe. I took an interview with the company and I shot the guns, and I was really blown away at how easy the guns were to shoot. Very soft recoil, very easy shooting. And, I started learning more about the product, but more so about the people behind the product. And that's how my relationship started with them. And then that's kind of how I made that transition out of the Army and over to the 226 platform. And then once the 320 came out, I mean, that was amazing.
Been seeing a lot of those in classes as of late. The new one, what's the X?
Yeah, the X5 Legion.
Yeah, I've been seeing quite a few of those. Yeah. Sweet shooting blasters.
Yeah, they're easy to shoot, man. It's very good.
Yeah, it's. I'm carrying a Sig right now. Not one of those big boys, but that's pretty cool stuff. The general public, it's funny, from time to time I'll see guys like on social media. And I don't like to sound like I poo-poo people because they're not aware of something. Like, I don't know crap about ladies' fashion. So that doesn't make me bad. I just don't know anything about it. But when people comment on stuff and they don't fully understand what they're, not just comment, but there's a lot of guys now that share content about their opinions on stuff. And it's interesting. Like, somebody was telling me the other day, like, that guy's never competed, but if he went to a match, he'd probably win. Well, like, let's contextualize that. Like, who's he competing against in what match? Like, is he going to shoot a 3-gun match against Taron Butler? Like, he's probably not going to win. Is he going to shoot a speed on steel match against you? Probably not going to win. And this guy's like, so what do you think? There's people that can't shoot at that level that aren't competing? Like, yeah. I go, yeah, this isn't like some like Disney movie where there's some kid in a farmyard that nobody knows and he's just going to step out like onto the baseball field and be, a home run hitter. I don't think people understand like what kind of blazing speed. I got a handful of friends that are GM level shooters, and we'll train at the club, and they'll run something, and I'm like, all right, I'll do it. And I'm a pretty good shooter. And like, okay, like you literally like went and got lunch and came back while I finished that, you know?
It's just it's a different game. I mean, it's a game, and that's what, you know, some guys, there's hell of a shooters out there, you know, that are really, really good at what they do. But there's so many small little aspects of the game to shave hundredths of a second that I literally spent my whole life trying to learn. And I think that's a big difference, you know. And even again, the Instagram stuff, some of the guys that I hang with and talk with, you know, we'll shoot some drills together, and their footwork is slowing them down. They're fast guys. They're strong guys. But there's a way you enter a position, getting the gun up on target, immediately being able to fire that shot before the next foot touches the ground, versus just jumping in the box and then presenting the pistol to the target. So there's a lot of small things that add up pretty quickly.
Little nuanced movements.
Exactly. Over multiple stages, it adds up pretty quickly.
What I've noticed watching shooters at your level, I talk about this with students, sometimes we'll roll tape on stuff, and we're not teaching people how to do what you do, but what I notice is it's less stuff. It's like watching like a good guitarist. There's not a lot that you see. It's the person just interacting with the tool, and it's not large, like herky-jerky movements, just very refined things with less movement and streamlined, efficient.
For sure. That's what it's all about. You know, I mean, and I teach movement courses. I teach a lot of courses, but one of my courses that I teach, excuse me, that I teach and that I'm.
Is that a COVID-19 call?
Well, hey, I'm quarantined. I'm staying inside my house right now, so we're good. But I think, you know, one of the things that people really enjoy working with me on is the movement stuff. And I'm not the fastest guy running, but it's how you exit, it's how you enter, it's economy of motion. You know, your hands go to the gun goes to the target. There should be no other additional movement, because any extra movement adds time to the clock. And in my world, I can win or lose a world championship, and I have won or lost a world championship by 1/100th of a second. Dude, it's sickening. I lost 8 weeks of sleep. No lie about that. I mean, because obviously I'm
at the end of that match, the guy that beat you, his total, for those listening, your elapsed time on all the stages, and his was 1/100th of a second difference.
1/100th of a second.
Ouch.
Dude, and we can go into the whole deal of my velocity is faster than his velocity and yada yada. But at the end of the day, that's what the score said, and it was unfortunate. But I think you learn so much from those struggles and those times on the range. Okay, how can I gain that 1/100th of a second? And that's what, like we talked about earlier, you know, you have to love it. You have to love the game. You have to be passionate about getting better to find those little tiny things.
The devil is in the details. Like I repeat this almost every podcast. My friends, you know, Super Dave Harrington, Harrington. Mm-hmm. Dave says, everything's important. Everything matters. Do the right thing at the right time, every time. Every time I say that, like, people like in classes or folks will say, like, here he goes again, reciting Dave. But like right there, like 1/100th of a second, there is not one thing that you could have done wrong to have and been lax on that would have, you know, been like a toss away. Like, that's okay. Like, I'll get it on the next one. That guy that's chasing you, 1/100th of a second. I mean, that's faster than the blink of an eye.
It is, really. It is. But it's going back to what you were saying. It's like, you know, you have guys out there who are incredible shooters, but there's also guys who have been trained in a sport for 20 or 30 years. There's difference there, that when you go and challenge those guys, you have to learn some of those little small details in the sport.
Mm-hmm. To get to that who was that beat you?
KCU Sabio.
Okay.
He beat me by 1/100th of a second at that time.
How long ago was that?
This must have been.
Because he's a young man.
Yeah, he's younger than me. He's probably in his early 30s now, I think, 32, 33.
Was he on the Army team when you were?
Yeah. So I actually brought him on board. He was one of the guys I hired in when we started.
So you like look at him like,
yeah, we have a love-hate relationship. He's like a little brother to me. You know, we love to push each other. We love to, you know, really get the best out of one another. we want to win. When I say we, like I want to win or he wants to win, but at the end of the day, if it's not him, he wants to be me and vice versa, man, because I know the type of effort that he puts in on the range, especially back then when we were training together. We had some really good battles. Yeah, so he beat me by 1/100th of a second at the at the Steel Nationals. And then in an IPSC match, it was 2008 Production Nationals, which nobody knew me for production at that point. At that point, I had only shot a dot and an optic, and everybody thought that I couldn't shoot without an optic. And so I wanted to kind of put that to bed, and I wanted to compete with a DASA gun back in 2008. And I shot against Dave Savigny, who many of heard that name, and he doesn't shoot.
One of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, he's extremely dominant. And I didn't really have a whole lot of expectations going into that match, other than I've been shooting for a bunch of years, and I just picked up this new gun. I shot it for 3 days. I had a little bit of training with it, and I went to the match. And I knew I was going to do well. I just wanted to be top 5 so I could show everybody that, hey, this guy can shoot without a dot. But as the match went on, like, I was doing really well, and I started gaining more and more confidence.
You were shooting a double single then?
I was shooting a double single, yeah, exactly. And again, never really done any of this. I was just getting prepared to get out of the Army, so I wanted to show my value to Sig and some of these other companies out there at the time. Anyway, long story short, in USPSA, we go by points, right? So I can say 1/100th of a second for a steel challenge, but in USPSA, it's all based on points. Anyway, I lost by 14/100ths of a point. 14/100ths of a point is like literally nothing. I mean, like you said, I can go back now and think about the delta on that target, the Charlie on that target, having short stroke my slide because I wasn't used to this type of a slide. Short stroke to slide, go click and have to rack. All those things, everything going through this was 12, 13 years ago, you know, and this is still in my mind.
You still see that tape in your head.
Yep, and so it's disappointing, you know, the fact that I lost, but
But you took second?
I took second, yeah. I took second there, and it was important for me to do well there. It would have been great to win that match, mainly because, you know, at that time in my career, I wanted to show people, hey, I can do more than what you think I can do. Now, that stuff doesn't matter as much to me as more of what other people think. I want to just go do things that I love and that I enjoy and shoot products that I want to shoot and win at the highest level. But I'm not gearing my training or gearing what division I'm going to shoot by what somebody else, you know, thinks, or what. I just do what I think is best from the company that I work for. But at the end of the day, that was an incredible battle with Dave Savigny. That was super close. He and I's had some battles down, you know, shooting 1911s, the single stack division. You know, going to some of the matches, shooting against him there. I mean, it's just a lot of fun shooting against these guys. But when you win or lose by such a small margin, as you said, everything matters.
Yeah, that's pretty intense stuff. But then because that doesn't. Let me rephrase that. Some people look at that like you and say, okay, what can I do to gain 14/100ths of a second next time? And you spend all that time working it out. How many rounds do you think that you've shot in your life? Any idea?
No idea on the exact round count, but God, I mean, I've been at it 30 years now. 30 years competing, so
20,000 a year, 50,000 a year. How many do you think?
I would probably say nowadays I'm shooting about 50 to 75,000 rounds a year, depending on the year. But back then, it was every bit of 150 to 200,000, probably for 10 straight years with the Army.
Do you think you needed to shoot that many? Looking back, like what you know now, could you have changed some things to not have to shoot that many?
Definitely. I could definitely change some things. You know, I mean, back then I wasn't paying for any ammo either, right? The Army was just buying me ammo. My dad was buying me ammo when I was a kid. So I could just shoot as much as I wanted to. But nowadays, I don't shoot as much as that for the fact that, number one, I don't have the time. I'm married. I have kids. I work for several different gun companies. So there's just not a lot of time there to do that. But also, you don't need to, right? So same thing in Dryfire. I tell folks all the time. Back then, again, when I was a kid, I had 4 hours a day to dry fire. That's a lot of time. Do you have 4 hours a day to do anything you want to do? I don't, you know, so I had to find a way to be more efficient in my dry fire. So now I probably only dry fire 10 or 15 minutes whenever I do, and that's not every day anymore. But the days that I don't live fire, I dry fire. But if I can get 10 to 20 minutes, at least half of my dry fire is done at half speed. And if I can do that at half speed, I can teach myself step by step by the numbers exactly the proper form, proper technique, proper reps. So that way in a stressful situation, whether it be competitively or combatively, I can revert to that training and be that much better because of it. So to your point, no, I go to the range now. I try to get on the range 3 days a week for 500 rounds per session.
That's still, compared to the average person, a metric ass ton of ammo every year, but
yeah, it's probably a lot. But I mean, that puts me in that category where I want to be as far as the amount of round count that I want to get to. I feel like it keeps me proficient, it keeps me going, keeps me engaged. But it's not to the point to where it engulfs my entire life. It's basically a 2 or 3 hour practice session, so I still can get to the gym, the range, and I can come home and be a dad, pick the kids up home from school.
Sure, you know? Sure.
That's kind of my deal.
So I get a lot of questions from folks about dry fire versus live fire, and I'm constantly trying to tell people, like, don't dry fire till you know how to shoot, so that you're not dry firing just whatever. You know, like if I don't golf, but if you gave me like a set of golf clubs and said, go practice with those, and then next week we'll go and I'll show you how to golf. Yeah. I wouldn't do anything with them because I wouldn't know what to do with them. So like, comment on that for a second.
I mean, as far as dry fire versus live fire?
Just in general. So like I get new shooters. Okay, I don't want to go to the range and waste ammo because I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know what I'm doing. Everybody tells me to dry fire. I bought this book from Ben or whoever. I got this great new book on dry fire. But what I notice is, my common response is, go take a class from somebody, like learn what you should be doing, so that when you're sitting there with the empty gun, you've got some capacity to self-correct and analyze and not just train weird, idiotic movements.
Yeah, I mean, I think in anything, we want to get as much knowledge and information as we can to know what we want to be trying to work on and implement in our training. And shooting is no different. So shooting, I always recommend going to a local match. So if you're getting involved in shooting, whether you want to be a competitive shooter or combative style shooter to protect your loved ones, just go to a match and watch how some of these guys operate and ask questions. Everybody's always impressed of how easy it is to get information from other folks. They're willing to help. The gun industry is amazing, man. Like, I love being a part of this industry because of that. You know, we can chat, we can share stories, we can share knowledge, and it's free. We can just talk, just like we're doing right now, right? We can talk and chat, but you got to go to the range and put in the work and let those guys see you helping set up the targets, taping targets, picking up steel, tearing down for the day, whatever it is. Put in some work with those guys and just have communications with them. They'll give you a lot of knowledge and information. That's number one. And you can take that knowledge and information and start building it into a program. I don't think a lot of people do this. I mean, I'm kind of a weirdo, right? I do this for a living, but everybody should have a training plan. Just like a workout program, you should have a shooting program.
I agree.
And that shooting program, whatever that is basically what you suck at. So I go to the range and I compete at the highest level, and I say, okay, where was my 3 biggest weak areas this weekend? I write all those down, and I say, okay, now how am I going to get better at those? I have some different sub-goals within each one of those goals that I want to get better at. And now that becomes my Livefire training program for the foreseeable future until I'm ready to move on. And then the Dryfire program is based upon that. So I said, okay, these are the 3 things I suck at. Let's just say it's recoil management for some reason. So I want to work on my stance.
I noticed that when I watched some videos of you. I didn't want to say anything.
Well, next time let me know so I can get better faster.
You got to hold the gun a little harder.
Okay, I'm going to work on that. So, but I make sure I get my stance and grip going. And it's also a lot about posture. Like, a lot of guys don't understand. I always tell folks, like, if this was my upper body, and if my lower body, if it was, a lot of guys kind of shoot with their shoulders back, so their hips get stuck underneath them. So if your hips go underneath you, your shoulders go back. And if the shoulders go into the balls of your feet, you're assisting the gun to push you back and recoil. But if you can counter that by taking your butt and push it back, your shoulders will go forward. Now taking the shoulders over the balls of your feet, bending your knees, getting more weight into the gun, you get a better recoil management process. So I can practice my draw stroke, and as I'm presenting the gun to the target, I can push my hips back slightly, just kind of arching the small of my back, kind of pushing my hips back. It's going to force my chest forward. That's going to create weight behind the gun. I can do that in dry fire in front of a mirror. So now I'm getting better at my recoil management. That's part of the process that I want to get better at in live fire. So I have to practice it in dry fire. So when you go to the range, it's time to take the test rather than trying to learn at the range, because you only have so much time and so much ammo. You have to be able to put it to good use. So yeah, I would say there needs to be a shooting program and there needs to be a dry fire program based upon that shooting program. So we're not just doing draws, reloads, transitions, opening up doors or whatever in dry fire just for the sake of doing it. We want to get better at live fire, and we're using dry fire to help us with slow, proper reps.
I dig it. Do you use self-talk at all? I don't mean in the dry fire practice, but just in your personal development. Do you talk to yourself? Neuro-linguistic programming, auto-suggestion, whatever term you want to call it?
So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you.
I mean, actually, we already established that you look at yourself in the mirror and
buff my head or brush my hair, whatever. Either way.
You're the best, Maxie. You're the best.
So here's a funny story. Being in the Army, I was exposed to a lot of good things, man. At the AMU, we had access to a lot of great things because we were considered Olympic athletes. Even though my sport wasn't an Olympic event, we have our world championship every 3 years with a couple hundred countries, a couple thousand people. And of course, our other disciplines had Olympic events. So we were considered Olympic athletes, and we were exposed to a lot. And we had the folks at West Point, they came down to us and they talked a lot about this. Affirmations and setting goals and all these things. So a mental management course, essentially, 20 years ago. And this might have been 20 years ago now. But, when I was there and I was chatting with those guys, they basically said, hey, what are the things you want to get better at? We talked about it. We had these long conversations, and they created a DVD for me. And I was to listen to this DVD every day, multiple times a day, on the way to work, on the way home from work, those kinds of things, or a CD. None of that worked for me, dude, I'll be honest. Like, it was hard for me to what I call fake the funk. And I'm not saying that it doesn't work for some people, but what worked for me was knowing, absolutely with 110% knowing that nobody else outworked me. And there was no other way that I could be any more prepared.
That was the catalyst that worked for you.
Yeah, for what worked for me was just knowing that I couldn't be any more prepared, because that's what scares me more than, even still to this day, that's what scares me more than anything is not being prepared. Like, I want to be prepared for everything as much as possible.
How do you know when enough's enough? I mean, like right now we've got just a perfect segue into what's happening in the world right now. Do you have an Abrams tank in your front yard? Do you have concertina wire around the house? Especially Katrina is a perfect example. What happened in that area after the hurricane, right? People lost their freaking minds and a lot of bad things happened. Like, not the same as what you're talking about in competition, but where does that not become an unhealthy thought habit? Where I got to keep going. I got to keep going. And of course, you found some balance. You've talked about making sure that you have time to be a dad and do these other roles, but comment on that.
Yeah, I think that's what's kept me grounded, is because I have such a great wife and a great family. My kids are awesome. I coach all their sports. There's life other than shooting for me, absolutely, for sure. But there was a time when it was all about shooting. I was extremely selfish, and that's all I cared about, was being the fastest man in the world with a handgun. But as you get older and there's other things out there, there has to be a balance. And I found that out pretty much the hard way. Again, Doug Koenig, a great mentor of mine, he's also married with 3 kids, and he's been doing this longer than me. So he and I chatted, and he said, hey, at some point, you're going to have to turn down a class, or you're going to have to turn down a sponsor, or you're going to, because every time you tell somebody else yes, you tell your family no, essentially, right? So that's what's happening. You only have so much time. So for me, it's important to make sure I have that great balance in my life. But when do you know, as far as if you're prepared enough, you don't know. So I continue to prepare every day. Like, my life's going to be on the line tomorrow. I mean, to the point to where I'll tell you, just another quick personal story. I just recently moved. My family and I, we stayed in the same town, but we moved to a different spot because I wanted to be able to have different things, to be able to have my work easier, have a gun shop, just things that make my life a little easier for work and closer to schools and things like that. Mm-hmm. But as soon as we moved, I immediately got one of my buddies to come over who is more in the tactical world. And I said, hey, dude, check out my house, look around. Where are some of the weak points in my house? What are some of the access points that I need to be alert to? What are some of the family plans that I had? This is before the craziness, right, of the COVID-19. We moved in, and I said, I basically need a family emergency plan. My kids sleep upstairs, I sleep downstairs. What are we doing? So we go through all those things to have a plan. So in a situation, If looting goes on here, who knows what's going to happen in the next few weeks, man, right? So you come into my house, we're going to have a plan, we're going to have a system. And my kids, we've talked about it. You go through the motions, you make sure everybody understands their roles. My oldest boy knows what he needs to do to take care of the young ones, and my wife knows where she needs to be. And so I'm not saying that I'm a crazy person for knowing these things and doing these things.
That doesn't make you crazy. That makes you smart.
So that's my point. Is like, to me, that's being prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're going out there and you're buying every roll of toilet paper and you're doing all these crazy things that other people are doing, I think that is a potential problem, right? Because you're not prepared. You're not prepared. You're like, oh shit. Now that's on a bigger scale. Now on me, on my job, for what I do for a living, on a lesser scale, shooting and winning world championships, I don't want to go to a match and look like I'm not doing my job, because I'm getting paid to be there. I'm getting paid to be the best. Everywhere I go, whether I want to or not, I'm expected to win. And that's a very, heavy thing to carry. And I'm very appreciative for that, to carry it, because that means in the last 20 years, I've put in a ton of work and I've won more than anybody else consistently. So people expect that. It's almost like, oh, he won again. But as soon as you lose, well, hey, whoa, why did he lose? Is he getting old?
How do you think you deal with that? Because you can't win forever, right?
You can't, man. And it's very, very hard. So I'm doing
Are you preparing yourself internally to deal with that? Is this something?
I just tell my friends, my close friends, I tell them, hey, don't let me lose like an asshole. Don't let me be that guy that doesn't want to pass on the knowledge, that doesn't want to be the mentor to some of the young guys. Right now, I'm still competing at the highest level. And over the years, I've done everything I could to push the other guys away from me for as long as I can, because I'm only 38 years old. I feel like I still have a good 5 or 10 more years at least. And then when I get there, why can't I be one of the first to win a world championship at 50 years old, right? So I'm going to keep pushing.
See, that self-talk right there that you don't believe in, you are literally using self-talk. You just didn't like the DVD, CD that you...
So going back to that exactly. So I can use that now to my advantage to say, look, why can't I? Because I've put in this work, and I continue to put in the work. Like now I'm doing different training at the gym.
Do you talk to yourself like, I can hear it right now. You're like, Maxie's going to win. Maxie's going to be 50 and still be winning. And you talk to your wife probably yells from the other room, Maxie, it's time for dinner. And does anybody call you Maxie, by the way, or just me?
Just you. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
What I got my whole life was Little Max.
Little Max?
Little Max, yeah.
I was always called Sticky Mickey. I'm just kidding.
No, but I think, so I guess the self-talk stuff I use internally. Like, a lot of dudes don't know that about me, but because I'm extremely, I try to be extremely humble, right? So I can make sure guys are out there and understanding, hey, this guy's the hardest working dude at what he does, but he likes to give back. He enjoys helping others, because then you become, two things happen. Number one, you become almost impossible to beat, because you're acting as if someone else is always bigger, better, faster, stronger. You're giving them that credit, so you're going to work harder. And number two, you're the type of person that people want to associate with. So it just makes life a lot better and more enjoyable when you're out there working. So yeah, I think some of that self-taught stuff, that self-talking, I can utilize because I truly believe it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the thing about the self-talk stuff. You have to believe it. And I didn't believe it back then when you put it on a CD. And I listened to it. I'm like, yeah, I don't believe it, because I wasn't seeing the consistent results. But now I know the program I'm in, it's a winning program. It's a consistency, repeatability equals success. That's my little cheesy tagline. That's what I live by.
Say that tagline again, please.
So consistency and repeatability equals success. So if I'm consistent every day, I'm trying to get better. I'm doing everything I can do, whether it's at the gym, with cognitive thinking drills, lifting drills, footwork drills, or at the range, or in the Dryfire, whatever it is, right? I'm being consistent in my efforts. And now I can make myself repeatable because I'm shooting in total control. I have control over what I'm doing. I know I'm going to draw into the plate rack in 2 seconds or 2 point whatever seconds. I can do that over and over and over again by applying these certain fundamentals and techniques. It's not a hey, is this going to happen? It's going to be, yeah, I can do it in this time, right? So now I can be repeatable. Could I go faster? Absolutely, but it won't be repeatable, right? So being repeatable over and over again, and then it's going to equal success, because that's what's happened for me over the last 20 years. That's what I've seen. So that's what I can teach now to guys, because that's the world that I live in, and that's the example that I can show. Hey, look, guys, if we can work on these 12 skill sets, whatever they are, consistently, and then you have the discipline to be shooting at a speed in which you are repeatable, right? We're not just trying to film an Instagram video here. We're trying to win a world championship. Can you do that repeatably? And now you have no option but to be successful, because the other guys are not doing that. Or there's very few. I don't want to say they're not doing that, but there's very few guys who are living by that model.
How do you deal with negativity, either from within or without, other people? How do you deal with that? Like, what's your go? Like, I'm the kind of guy that I have, like, I don't want to deal with it. I'm polite about it, but how do you deal with that? Inside or outside negativity? So
2 things. The first is I only surround myself with people I want to surround myself with.
I dig that.
You know what I mean? Like, my circle is super, super small. My circle's always been very small, but I think over the years it's gotten smaller. So every time I go to a match, you probably see me shooting with the same guys. I make sure I contact the match director ahead of time and say, I want to buy an entire squad. I don't want to slot, I want to buy an entire squad. And then I just fill it with the people I want to fill it with, right? So, and I don't know if that's good or bad, but I like to surround myself with people that if I'm going to be there with you for 12 hours a day or whatever it is, I want it to be the right person, right? The type of people that's going to make me better, make me have an enjoyable time. Because one of the things is, if you're having fun, you're going to do well. And if you're doing well, you're going to have fun. Yeah. So, and I love what I do, but I don't want to be around people that don't share the same passion or that are giving me that negative energy. So that's the first thing. The first thing is I always surround myself with the right people at 100% of the time. And then the next thing is that if I am in a situation, or you see somebody post something, or you see something, you heard something that they said maybe about you, I use that as fuel, man. Like, I'm a super competitive guy. A lot of people don't know that about me because I try to, be the humble guy out there. But if you're coming at me and it's either me or you, I'm going to do everything in my power to come out with that W and be that champion, because I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do.
Broke up on me. Go back 10 seconds. You said, if you try to come at me, and then you froze.
Yeah. So I'm like, so a lot of people don't know how competitive I am. If you try to come at me and you challenge me, now if we're just pushing one another, yeah, let's get better. But if you challenge me in a negative way, man, I'm putting your name on the board and I'm working everything I have. And you've just become my self-talk, right? So now I'm looking at, like, that guy is going down, and this happened recently. I won't name names, but this happened recently, and I needed it so badly, because I'm at a point sometimes where I'm like, man, I might just go hang out with my kids today. I might not go to the range today. But as soon as some situations started to happen last year, or the year before, just some recent situations, I was like, ooh, I needed that, man. I really somebody
was talking some smack.
Yeah, you feel that negative energy sometimes. And I know, like, guys,
I'll text you from time to time and just call you a loser. You look like you're slipping, man.
Yeah, but sometimes guys don't want to see dudes win all the time, and I get it. Like, some people don't like the Patriots, some people don't like LeBron James, some people, whatever. But at the end of the day, I love what I do, and I try to be a good person. And the minute that there's other dudes out there who are trying to beat me, not just because they want to shoot their best, but just because they want to see me do poorly so they can win, that's when I'm like, man, what are we doing this for? It's such a small sport. It's such a small industry. Why are we butting heads like this? If I'm the best at what I do and I'm opening my arms to you and say, hey, I'm willing to help, let's help you elevate your game so you can become a pro shooter and a true ambassador of our sport. Because guess what? If there's more true ambassadors of our sport, it's only going to grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that helps me and it helps you.
Yeah.
Right? But if you come at me with negative energy and you're trying to do everything you can to shut me down and do some things that I would consider, not appropriate and not being a great ambassador for our sport, just so you can win, well, guess what? That's going to be very short-lived for you, and you're not going to make it to the level you want to make it to, and you're only hurting our industry. So that's my whole thing.
Do you ever want to challenge these guys to a real gunfight? Do you ever? I know I'm being facetious, but do you ever just for a second think, like, could I just have a real gunfight with them just to see, like, who's man enough?
Well, I mean,
answer that.
That thought really hasn't crossed my mind. maybe like to the points where you're like, damn, this guy, what is this guy doing? Like, I talk to my wife all the time, and I'm like, I don't really know what to do with this person anymore, because I want to help them, I want to mentor them, but if they want to, hurt me and my family, what's the point? No, it's just
There's
frustrating.
a lot of that, I think, in this business that doesn't exist in other businesses because we have so many meat-eating, type A personality guys. I've been involved in numerous industries, politics for a long time, very cutthroat. But, I mean, I know a guy that was I don't want to even say what match, but years ago he won a huge match years ago. And because of that, everybody else sucks. But, like, you won that match like 22 years ago. And that's awesome. I mean, and this guy's still an awesome shooter, but everybody sucks. And that guy's stupid. And the only reason he's got a sponsorship is because blah, blah, blah. And like,
So
I mean,
that's
he's kind of that guy we're talking about. Like, you don't want to be squatted with him, or I don't really want him in my head. Like, dude, you could have done all those things. You had all the skill and talent to do it. You just gave up.
exactly, and that's the negative guy that I'm talking about, like that type of negativity. It's just, and honestly, I found when you surround yourself with that negativity and you have to deal with it over and over and over again. It's not healthy for you. It's not good for you. So
You either succumb to it and become it, or you have to, like, rise above it and cut away from it.
That's exactly, yeah. So I had a situation happen probably 5 years ago or so, and the guy that I was spending a lot of time on, man, I really, really wanted him to do well. And then I just felt like, I couldn't believe the things he was doing. And he was very pissed off to see me do well. And it was apparent. He would throw things out.
Jealousy and...
Jealousy, yeah. And I just couldn't take it anymore. And I finally, I got away from it. And a couple of years went by before I actually made up with the guy. And still to this day, like, we don't do a whole lot together. But it was important for me just to be like, you know what, just let me release this negative energy. Because every time I was at the range, I would see him and I would get pissed off, and it would affect what I was doing. It was affecting my...
If he was to hear this right now, I'm sure he'd know, hey, man, Maxie's talking about me.
Yeah.
By the way, you're always going to be Maxie to me now forever. Would he be like, man, why is that mother effer, still thinking about this or talking about it? Or would he be like, I'm glad we put that to bed?
I'm sure he'd be glad we put it to bed too, because I'm sure he wasn't happy with it either.
Okay.
But yeah, so anyway, you got to get rid of that negative stuff. Keep your circle small, and that's the only way to get better and only way to grow as a person and be able to help other people, and really to be able to help our industry. Because again, if we're fighting against one another, how are we going to make it mainstream one day and get this thing as big as possible? I mean, I look back when I was watching that video we talked about earlier, 30 years ago. I felt like it was bigger back then than it is now, and maybe that's because I was a new guy back then, coming up, looking up to Doug Koenig and Rob Latham and all these other guys, like, wow, that's so awesome. But even back then, they were talking about six-figure deals. Robbie would sign this deal, Dougie signed that deal. That stuff isn't around that much anymore these days.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people, you could probably count on one hand who are doing it, maybe two hands, who's doing it for a true living. There's a lot of trainers out there, right? But who is actually getting paid from a large gun company a full-time salary to just shoot? There's not many, and it's because I feel like we've been battling ourselves for so long. Like you said, there's A-type personalities, right? But I can totally appreciate what you do. I don't think we were on air. I don't think we were recording when we were talking earlier, that my trainer, my physical trainer, brought a video of you to me, I don't know, a year or two ago. And he was impressed with what you were doing. He brought it to me, and I was like, I can totally appreciate what these other guys are doing. I didn't automatically say, nah, that guy, he can't compete. No, I was like, damn, that's great.
That's cool. What was it? Do you remember? Or are you just making up shit?
No, I'm not making up it. It was some video you were doing. There was some video you were doing in an indoor range, and he was fairly new to concealed carry. So he was getting a lot of great information from you to protect himself and his family. And I was like, yeah, that's great content. It was very well put together. It was straight to the point. It was, it was entertaining at the same time. It was great info. So I can totally appreciate what guys like you are doing, and I hope guys like you can appreciate what I'm doing.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we're on two different end spectrums, but we're doing the same thing. We're in the same industry.
I still want to shoot fast. I'm just not willing to trade my life. Not that that's like that. You love training to get faster. I want to drink beer at night, and lead poisoning is a bad thing too, man. You get your lead levels checked at all?
I haven't got them checked, but I
never.
Maybe when I was in the Army. I don't know. I don't really remember, but I do know a good friend of mine who shot in an indoor range a lot and got checked, and he was in serious condition. He had to get himself taken care of. I'm shooting all outdoors now 95% of the time, and I don't load any ammo anymore. It's all factory stuff that I'm using.
What do you shoot, by the way? What ammo?
I'm shooting the Sig Sauer factory ammo.
Okay.
Yeah, so I developed a new
I forgot that they launched that line. Yeah.
Yeah, so when they launched that back then, when it was early on, we were developing, and then finally, I would say probably about 2 years ago, I started using what we call the Match Elite. And that's a line that I helped develop to make sure it's the right specs, the right powder, the right projectile, the right velocity, and all that stuff. So, yeah, I wouldn't use anything else. I mean, it's extremely accurate. It's the most accurate round that I've shot out of my X5s. So I feel like when I go to a competition, I'm prepared, and my equipment is prepared as well.
You said that you train to shoot acceptable accuracy. Every guy I've ever met that's like master class or above, and you're at the tip of that spear, so to speak, is always a really accurate shooter when they want to or need to be. Like, what kind of a group could you shoot out of your competition gun with that ammo at, say, 25 yards? Like, if you had the time to sit there and get a good platform behind the gun.
Yeah, so I am not known for just stand-up bullseye type shooting. That's one of my things I would love to get better at, because I've always believed in that acceptable accuracy. But still, I mean, I still try to hold the 2-inch group at 25 yards is where I would like to be. That tells me that I'm good. I won't say that I'm good, but that tells me that I'm where I need to be as far as my accuracy, that I can shoot a small size target if I needed to.
So you could go back to 25 yards and keep them in the center of the B8 black if you needed to.
I mean, I wouldn't say I can do it every single time, but that's where I want my equipment to be able to do, and that's what I want to be able to do at 25 yards, which I think is great with that, that platform that, just comes off an assembly line, a stock firearm. I think that's incredible with the ammo that we're using. So I'll kind of back up and say that's where I want to be, but I always tell folks 4 inches. If you can hold 4 inches at 25 yards, that tells me that you can shoot just about any shot in our sport. And I can get you shooting faster.
That's a good baseline at 4 inches. I mean, that's not easy,
right?
But it's totally doable with modern firearms. We're so lucky now, like you said, stuff coming off the assembly line, dude. This 365 on my hip, I've got maybe 60,000 rounds through. I've got 4 of these, like 2 of the little guys and 2 of the big ones, and they're bone stock except some stippling from Boresight Solutions. I can frickin' shoot anything with that little gun that I can with any of my full-size, beautiful guns. And it's like, I think people don't understand how awesome that is. You can go buy a $500 plastic gun, polymer, and that it's capable of that kind of stuff. Headshots at 25 yards out of the box, and you don't got to do anything to it, and it'll eat all the ammo. Yeah, we're like in a golden age of what we can buy. Do you shoot those at all?
365s? Yeah, I carry 365 as well.
The XL or the little guy?
Just the standard one. Yeah, I'm waiting. I'm trying to get an XL right now with a Romeo 0. That's what I'm waiting for with the red dot optic. I think that'll be kind of interesting to try.
Sig won't get you one?
Well, I don't push for things. Yes, I will get one very soon. But the problem is the Romeo Zeros are very hard to get right now.
I see.
So, and I don't want to be that guy that takes something when we have law enforcement guys who need it. So I'll wait for things to kind of settle down and I'll grab it.
Yeah, I don't have one with the optic. I've got the XL's got the cutout. I never did order that optic, but I'm kind of anti-red dots.
Okay.
I own a dozen of them. I'm not anti for any reason. I just don't want to have one because then I'm not going to want to not have one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good stuff. I'd like to ask folks before we part ways a couple things. One, people can follow you on Instagram, right? What's your Instagram handle? It's just your name, right?
It is. It's Max J Michel.
J. What's J stand for?
John.
Maxie John.
Maxie John. There you go. You'd be the only guy to call me Maxie John.
So, and you've got you're on all over Sig's website. There's tons of YouTube videos of you out there. You do classes?
Yeah, I'm all over the world, really, teaching. So, I mean, you can easily find me on Max J. Michel at Instagram, also Facebook, maxmichel.us, and then my website, maxmichel.com, which we're kind of re-engineering right now. But
Okay.
Yeah, we're getting that set up. But yeah, so the easiest way to find me is just through one of the social platforms and just shoot me a DM or something like that, or shoot me an email at max@maxmichel.com. And
I'm assuming your classes probably fill up. If people wanted to host you, can they get a hold of you through the website?
That's the easiest thing, is that people just host me. Just send me an email or reach out to me on Instagram. Because typically what happens is if a guy calls or emails and says, hey, I want to set up a course, or I want to be in a course, I just tell him, hey, it's easier, just find 8 or 10 of your local buddies and we'll run the course right there in your backyard. And then so essentially the courses get filled by those local, what I call class leaders. And I don't really do any open enrollment courses anymore, other than the courses that I teach at Sig Sauer, which we'll be teaching a couple of courses this year at the Sig Academy. That's the only open enrollment courses that I really do anymore. And then
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
And I do a lot of private training as well. So some guys don't like the classroom setting. What
do you teach when you're at Sig Academy?
So I'll be teaching our Steel Frenzy course, which is essentially speed shooting on steel.
Cool.
So I'll be teaching that. Well, who knows now what's going to happen, but I'm scheduled to be up there May 6th through the 8th to teach that. But I think
we're doing it. I've got all kinds of stuff. I just keep telling people, man, we're going. Keep pushing. Mask up and get on the range.
Yeah.
That's cool. So you guys know how to find him. I always ask folks this: if the people that we just talked with, that you have been listening and viewing, if they never meet you in person, if for whatever reason they never see you again online or anywhere else, hypothetically speaking, what would you leave them with? What would you pass on to folks if you only ever passed their way once in life?
Yeah, I mean, continue to be the type of person that people want to associate with. Just be a good person in general. So remain humble. Be the hardest working dude in the room, but remain humble. Because like I said, 2 things happen when you're a humble person. Number one, you're always going to be the hardest working dude out there because you're always going to act as if someone's bigger, better, stronger, and faster than you. And of course, it'll make you extremely humble and be the type of person that people want to associate with. So look, man, just be the type of person that you want to be around. Be the type of person that you want your daughter to grow up with. Just be the type of person that people can say, hey, Max was a good person. Max is a good dude, but yeah, he happened to be a decent shooter as well. But overall, just be the hardest working dude out there, but remain incredibly humble.
I dig it, man. That's good stuff. You made me like you more talking with you. It's oftentimes, you meet people or get to learn more about somebody that because of what they do for work, and you find out, yeah, you know what? I only want to know that guy for what he does for work. And what you just said, that's I think what makes America better. Let's help young dudes and dudes of any age want to be better people. Yeah.
Absolutely, man.
I like that.
I teach my kids the same way. I teach them the same way. Always act as if, man, somebody is out there that wants, and I tell my son all the time, man, look, there's only so many college football scholarships out there. There might be one in your school. So look around your locker room. Is there anybody better than you? Yeah, this guy's better than me. It ain't you then today. There's one going out. It's got to be you. And how are you going to make it you? You know what I mean? But
sweep the leg.
There you go. But yeah, be humble while you sweep their leg.
Yeah, I was joking, of course. You guys that tuned in, I hope you enjoyed this podcast, this discussion. If you did, of course, you're watching it either on our website or on YouTube. Share it. Share the link. Say, hey, I listened to this podcast with this world champion shooter guy, and he passed on some good bits of information. Share it with your friends, your buddies. Sig will appreciate it. And I'm the only one in this 3-way discussion here that's not getting paid by Sig to shoot the shit out of them, but that's okay. This was brought to you by Gunfighter Gun Oil, which is the best synthetic lube on the market, which also works for fishing lures and anything that you actually need to put lubricant on. Mickey with CarryTrainer.com and the Higher Line Podcast. Thank you, Mr. Michel.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, sir. Thank you.
Visit our website, CarryTrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., Carry Trainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@carrytrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@carrytrainer.com or carrytrainer.com.